One of the apparent issues surrounding the up-and-coming science fiction action-adventure RPG Exodus is the fact that all the aliens in the game are sort of not really aliens, which is to say, they all have a terrestrial origin. Now, to be fair, I am using the word issue very lightly here because most people have never even heard of Exodus at this stage, and it hasn't been a huge amount of people I've seen voice these complaints. But of the possible concerns that some people have, this one has been chief among them simply based on the comments that they've shared, which is fair enough. Given this fact, I thought it would be a good idea to take a deeper dive into the aliens of Exodus, as it were, the Celestials. And this video is meant to serve as an introduction and onboarding for newcomers, though it may also be of interest to people who have been following along the whole time as well. We want to explore the idea and conceptualization behind the Celestials, Exodus's terrestrial aliens. Now, at the outset, I have to admit I'm a bit biased here, because personally, I really like the concept behind the Celestials. In fact, it's my favorite thing about Exodus thus far. And I'm not here to convert you, but I think given sufficient explanation and exposition, I may be able to turn the tide of opinions on those who fall on the more skeptical side of the spectrum when it comes to Exodus's terrestrial aliens. And whilst I won't be spoiling any plot points of the book Exodus, the Archimedes Engine, I will be making liberal use of the descriptions and explanations offered by the book concerning Celestials. So with that preamble, let us commence. Let's begin with the technical definition of alien, seen from an etymological standpoint. So here we have the original meaning of belonging to someone else and later to exotic or foreign. And one of the definitions listed here is indeed one referring to a life form of extraterrestrial origin and captures the most pragmatic sense of the word alien in English. And most people, of course, when they think of aliens, do immediately think of life forms from outer space. Now, I will later argue as to why, in some sense, the Celestials of Exodus not only cohere with the traditional definition of alien, but also sync with one of the older meanings of the word alien, that being exotic or foreign. But above all, we must first ask ourselves the question, why do some people seem to be disappointed with the fact that Exodus' aliens, the Celestials, are in fact quote-unquote just evolved humans? Well, after such games as Mass Effect, with their many aliens and different histories and interactions, it almost seems like a letdown for Exodus to not have that. And I've even seen people suggest that everyone is quote-unquote human in Exodus and Celestials are just evolved humans. Because I think people, insofar as they have a problem with this, have become hyper-focused on the definition of alien, and much less so on the implementation and unique properties of the Celestials in Exodus, which can quite literally be as alien as anything you might imagine in a traditional roster of extraterrestrials, and in some cases, even more so. Ultimately, I think it is the strangeness of aliens and their differences that most intrigue us, rather than their status as not being from planet Earth. And Celestials can indeed be exceptionally strange. All Celestials do originate from Earth, but partly due to natural evolution, but likely primarily due to genetic engineering, most of them bear no resemblance whatsoever to traditional humans, whom they all look down on to varying degrees. The primary reason, to the best of our understanding, why Celestials chose to genetically engineer themselves into something else has everything to do with classic evolutionary principles of adaptation, but with some twists. The basic story goes like this. Celestials evolved from humans who settled in the Centauri cluster thousands of years ago. Through genetic engineering, these early settlers flourished, creating a multitude of diverse cultures and advanced civilizations. And this diversity of cultures and civilizations arose in part from the different directions the original humans decided to go in, but above all from competition, just as with natural selection. This competition itself was based on a limitation of resources, again, very much in sync with natural evolution, but specifically due to the paucity of so-called green worlds, or worlds that were suitable for complex life. As a result of this, a period lasting nearly 6,000 years that has come to be called the Remnant Era came about, where incredibly powerful weapons were built, and massive genocidal wars took place, and not infrequently entire planets were destroyed in the process. It was these wars waged for the sake of habitable planets that truly spurred on the most radical of celestial evolutions, and led to the many different species of today, although many of these species also went extinct in time. Different Celestials chose to evolve in different ways, primarily with an eye towards beating competing Celestials, but also for adaptive environmental reasons, depending on the planet. And all these conflicts culminate in the so-called Formation Wars, when war efforts attain their maximum and entire systems become factories of weapons of mass destruction, and hundreds upon hundreds of potentially habitable worlds are annihilated, after which the Celestials begin to take on many of the traditionally familiar forms one sees today. More importantly, the emergence of a supremely powerful species of Celestial, referred to as the Elohim, permanently changes the cosmic landscape of the Centauri cluster, as they introduce new forms of technology, called the Gates of Heaven, which allow ships to travel between systems at near light speed, among other forms of technology, as well as intransgressible laws in order to prevent the kind of genocidal conflict that nearly brought down the entire cluster from ever happening again. Now there is more, but after this period, referred to as the Crucible Era, a long period of status quo and stability ensues, and for this reason I want to talk about the various celestial species. Now, we don't know all too much about the many celestial species as of yet, but we do know there are many different types, potentially dozens, and to give you a picture of how different and interesting they could be, I will primarily talk about the ones we have the most information on. The species we, the players, will have the most to do with are the Imperial Celestials of the Crown Dominion, something that has been confirmed by the developers, and coincidentally, we also know the most about them, largely from the book. Imperial Crown Celestials are tall and humanoid-looking, and have a unique biotechnological culture called the Mind Line, through which a volunteer serves as a host body for the consciousness of another Crown Celestial every 7 or 8 decades or so, which, when done successfully, allows Crown Celestials to live for untold millennia. No other celestial species that we know of has this particular feature. Mind lines are usually established between parents and offspring, for which the offspring often compete, in order to find the best among them to serve as host. And the host contributes their genetic information to the mind line, whilst the old consciousness of the previous Celestial is preserved. Beyond this, Imperial Celestials have a very different reproductive procedure compared to humans, as Imperial Celestial females lay eggs, referred to as spawning. A female can spawn multiple eggs, 4 to 5 is typical, though there are instances of more, and in a striking departure from human biology, Imperial male Celestials are the ones who carry the fertilized eggs to term. They possess a marsupial-like pouch where the eggs are transferred and gestated. This also flips the traditional parental roles on their head, because the father's relationship with the offspring appears to be more akin to that of a human mother than that of a human father. At least that is my interpretation of how Crown Celestial fathers interact with their children, appearing more typically maternal rather than paternal in dealing with their children. In terms of social structure, the Crown Celestials live within the confines of an empire, ruled by an empress and 5 queens, where every 60 years the queens rotate with each other, and another one assumes the role of empress. This structure exists to ensure maximum stability within the empire, which is, given the nature of the Crown Celestials with their mind-line culture, an absolute necessity in the eyes of the ruling class. Moreover, Crown Celestials maintain an extremely hierarchical society. There are 6 great ruling grand houses, and performance within the Crown social structure can quickly lead to promotions or demotions in position on a semi-regular basis. Crown Celestials also maintain a class of humans that are referred to as Uranics, that serve the Celestials in matters of food production and governance on 2 major planets. Given the views that most Celestials have on humans, and it isn't really that different with the Crown Celestials, the humans are nearly universally looked down upon. But the Crown Celestials, in contrast to many other Celestials, have come to recognize a certain utility in humans. Now unfortunately, we have far less information on other celestial species as of the making of this video, but we do have some. The Elohim we know next to nothing about, save for the very important fact that they have created and built the most important technology in the cluster, such as the Gates of Heaven, that allow for convenient near light speed travel, and the Archimedes engine, which allows for the moving of planets, as well as other forms of technology for the advanced terraforming of planets. They were clearly the most powerful of Celestials to have ever lived, and even after disappearing thousands of years ago, the laws and rules of engagement they had established are still followed and respected today, if only out of fear. As for example, when one violates the Elohim's rules, the Gates of Heaven no longer function for the violator. The Elohim will almost certainly play a large role in Exodus, in a similar fashion to, dare I say, the Protheans. A contemporary species of Celestials that we have less information on is the Heresy Celestials. Like seemingly all Celestials, they look down on humans and consider themselves the most refined and evolved of Celestials. In fact, the Heresy Dominion considers the Crown Dominion Celestials barely one step above basic human stock, and they don't believe they are true Celestials. They believe the Crown Dominion's focus on mind line preservation has negatively impacted their evolution. The two Heresy Celestials we encounter in the book are nearly 3 meters tall and possess 4 arms and multiple eyes, and a physiology which is speculated to have evolved for high-G combat, though no further information on this is available. And unlike Crown Celestials, they do not propagate themselves via mind line, but instead have a fairly extended lifespan of 400 to 500 years. Although little is known at this time about their broader societal structure, Heresy Dominion Celestials value diplomacy highly, and the Heresy Dominion has the largest ship fabrication astro-engineering industry within 20 light years. Now, the Maruyama you've most likely already encountered in the Exodus trailer that came out a while ago. They appear to be the most dangerous and classically evil, if you will, of the Celestials. Now, the Maruyama do not appear to have a constant form. Rather, they can body morph and shift form depending on the environment. What's more, they appear to possess multiple consciousnesses divided up across multiple bodies, sometimes referred to as the multi-moiety, even if we do not know what any of these forms look like. The Maruyama, unlike most other Celestials, inhabit massive ships composed of seemingly organic-like material, made up of huge fleets, and do not make use of the gates of heaven for travel, traversing the cluster at a much slower pace than other Celestials, which, among other reasons, makes them all the more unpredictable. Perhaps most infamously, the Maruyama are known for capturing sentients and torturing them for the purpose of extracting memories and emotions from them, though no one knows why they do this, or what end they seek to achieve by doing this. What makes the Maruyama dangerous is their alienness, no pun intended, because they are neither physiologically relatable to most Celestials, nor are there machinations, nor tactics. It's almost a certainty that the Maruyama will figure prominently in the actual Exodus game as antagonists. There are, of course, many other types of Celestials, but information on them is sparse. The Talak Te Celestials, for example, are physiologically very similar to the Maruyama, in that they too have evolved a multi-moiety consciousness and existence, and live on massive ships made up of huge fleets. But unlike the Maruyama, they are primarily focused on trade. Then you have the Ratarajan Celestials, who are an insular species that live within 10-meter spheres, leading to speculation that they may have in fact merged with technology. And beyond this, there are many more, but we simply have so little information on them, we can't speak about them confidently. A final and important piece of information to discuss is the notion of the Great Game. The Great Game refers to the complex and often ruthless competition for power and influence amongst the various celestial dominions and factions in the Centauri cluster. It is a multifaceted conflict waged through intricate strategies, economic manipulation, technological advancements, and ideological maneuvering, with actual physical conflict typically employed as a last resort. And this too is sure to feature into the actual game of Exodus, inasmuch as we, the players, become enmeshed in the consequences of the Great Game, and even more specifically, as we had talked about the Maruyama, the Great Game of the Maruyama is known to be very long-term, and perhaps the most complex of all the Great Games, which adds an additional layer of horror to them that other Celestials lack. But taking all of these things into account, the most important point to be driven home here is just how alien Celestials actually are, even when compared to traditional aliens. And in this sense, given their absolute strangeness and the vast differences between them, they certainly qualify as being just as interesting as traditional extraterrestrials are, at least in my book. And something else that we know as yet very little about is how most of the current-day Celestials evolved. For example, what are the details of the genetic engineering technology they've employed, and just how rapidly did these changes take place? There's even some information gathered from the book that some factions of Imperial Crown Celestials wanted to evolve even further. My earnest hope is that we learn more about the biotechnology that the Celestials have used to evolve themselves, as well as to promote their own genetically modified servants, the Changelings and the Awakened, who deserve their own separate videos. Regardless, I hope that you found this brief expose on Celestials interesting and informative, and rest assured, I will be covering them in greater depth in the future, but as always, thank you for tuning in, and if you like my content and my takes, you can leave a like, comment, and share, and subscribe. It'd be much appreciated as it really helps out the channel, and I'll check you out next time. Take care.